Welcome to Green Time. I'm host Don Fitz. This episode we're going to be talking about community building at Dancing Rabbit. Before we get into our discussion, let's take a look at a movie, Dancing Rabbit Ecovillage, Green Community Building.
Dancing Rabbit Ecovillage was founded in 1997 with the mission of growing to a village the size of 500 to 1,000 people and being a model of sustainability for the world. Dancing Rabbit Ecovillage is a community of 65 people. In 5 years' time, we'll be well over 100 people. And every year we have hundreds of people coming through and learning about sustainability from us. With this new community building, Dancing Rabbit will be able to grow and flourish, meeting the growing interest in sustainability by providing a successful example for others to make changes in their own lives.
This building is set to be one of the most sustainable buildings in the world. Not only are we set to get LEED Platinum, the highest level of USGBC's Green Building Certification Scheme, we're also on track for Living Building Challenge, a new and even more stringent assessment system for buildings. Only 3 buildings in the world are currently Living Building Challenge certified.
In our new community building, we'll be taking the best of what we've learned in the last 15 years. We will be incorporating living roofs, strawbale, natural plasters, and some green building elements like airtightness, as well as passive solar gain.
Even for Dancing Rabbit, we're really pushing the envelope with this building. We're doing things like not using any combustibles for fuel. It's all going to be electricity from renewable energy. We're even going beyond net zero energy. This building will produce on-site more energy annually than it consumes, which is really remarkable.
All of our village will surround this structure, making the new community building the social center where we gather.
A project as ambitious as this is an incredible undertaking for any organisation, but Dancing Rabbit has really leapt in. Everyone from kids to the oldest members, from established families to visitors passing through, have all been involved in helping design the building. They'll all be involved to some degree in building the building, and then they'll actually be the ones who use it. And that's a really amazing thing for a building and a community.
Dancing Rabbit's new community building will be an amazing example of ecological building and a key step toward the growth of Dancing Rabbit as a village. Sustainability is not just a dream. We must do it. We can do it, and we are doing it. Spread the word, get involved, and if you want to support in any way, visit our website at greencommunitybuilding.com.
Welcome back to Green Time. I'm host Don Fitz. We just saw a movie about community building at Dancing Rabbit Ecovillage, which is the topic of our discussion. With me I have a couple of guests who are very knowledgeable of Dancing Rabbit. I have Tony Sirna, and you're one of the founding members of Dancing Rabbit.
Yes, I am. I've been there for 16 years.
16 years. And Sharon Bagatell, am I pronouncing that correctly?
That's right.
And you're a member of Dancing, you live at Dancing Rabbit, correct?
I do.
Okay, and how long have you been at Dancing Rabbit?
Been there for 3 years.
Okay, so you're adjusting to it, and I hear that you're doing your own building there.
I am. Along with my partner, we're building our home. Mm-hmm. It's a building that has many different building techniques, natural building techniques incorporated into it. And we're right in the middle of it right now.
Oh, fantastic. So do you know how much space it'll be when you get done?
Our home is 800 square feet and includes a workshop and a storage area that's built in, because one of the big features of our home is that we are actually going to be gardening on our roof. Okay. So we wanted to incorporate all the rainwater catchment and all the space on the roof that we could under one roof.
Oh, and that's great, because what a lot of home building just assumes it's the roof is dead space, but you'll be using it for.
This will be very active.
Okay.
Yeah.
And tell me something about. I think the Dancing Rabbit is also working on a common house. Could you tell me a little, first of all, what is a common house? Yeah. And what are y'all doing with it?
We have a common house now that is what I call the kind of the heart space of the community. It's a place that we all own in common and provides a lot of different services for us that we can choose to use or not. It has a central meeting room, there's a kitchen, people cook and eat in there, and there's a kids room, there's showers. So that each home does not have to have all of those services built into their home. So we have, every house doesn't have to have its own shower with all the pipes and everything that goes into. Well,
let me ask you this. If a guest comes to Dancing Rabbit either because they want to look at it or because they're a relative and they want to stay with you for a little bit, where would that person stay?
There are a variety of places. Sometimes they can stay with people. We do have small homes, so we don't have a guest room necessarily.
No, nobody has a guest room, okay.
But we're often able to provide
do people ever stay at the common house?
Not typically.
Okay, so they're more likely to stay with
We do have a bed and breakfast, and we have camping areas. But the common house isn't necessarily set up to accommodate that. It's designed to accommodate other sorts of needs like showers and
well, we try and keep it a space where we can all go there at any time of the day, and it's a place where we can all come together, create connection, and share it all as one. So if someone was sleeping there, that makes it harder to do that at different hours of the day.
Yeah, I know that some eco-villages, they'll have a little space set aside, for guests, but that's a different design. Now tell me, what about the amount of space that per person at Dancing Rabbit is different from most American homes? You have smaller space per person, right?
Yes, we do. Generally, we're really encouraged to keep our homes on a smaller scale, and to have just the amount of services that you feel that you really need within your home. So some people choose to have a kitchen, other people choose to use a kitchen in common with other people or in the common house.
Oh, you could have a home where you use the common house kitchen.
Many people do.
Right.
Oh, okay. Well, that's extremely efficient.
Right.
Indeed it is.
Okay, and let me tell you, we're going to be talking about building and how people build at Dancing Rabbit. Could you tell me a little bit about what a passive house is and what passive house standards are?
Sure. Passive house standard, it's a relatively new standard. It's coming out of Europe, mostly from Germany. And basically they mandate a certain level of insulation and a certain amount of airtightness, and then they use mechanical ventilation to make sure that the indoor air quality is good. And by doing that, you can have a house that really requires almost no supplemental heating or cooling. And you basically, the human activity or the appliances or any other electrical things and the passive solar heating from the sun can provide all the heat that the house would need. So you can really reduce your energy usage in a house by 80 to 90%. And we haven't designed buildings yet to that specific standard. It's a very rigorous standard that's hard to meet, but a lot of our buildings are very close to that, and we're striving for that in the future as well.
Now, am I correct, with a passive house you would not have a heating or cooling system that you would use energy for? Everything would be from the sun. Yeah,
well, they often say you have a ventilation system instead of a heating system. Usually, there's some small amount of supplemental heat to just to take the to add just a little bit more heat when you need to. And some will actually have a small air conditioning unit, but much smaller than you would ever see in a traditional American home.
Okay. Now, Sharon, you said that you're building a house. Are you using timber framing for the house?
We are.
What is that? I read that on the notes of topics to go over, but I have no idea what a timber framing house is.
We are actually using whole trees. It's called roundwood timber framing. Okay. So we take trees that were harvested locally, and we join them together with posts and beams, and we use a lot of hammer and chisel, a lot of hand tools to put them together, and we've made our own little wooden pegs to join the posts and beam together. And one of the things that we find important about timber framing is that it really reduces the embodied energy that goes into a home. When you have a big post or beam that's hasn't had a lot of milling going into it prior to, then you've got a lot less energy right there that you're already putting into the house.
Okay, well that's great. And one of the topics that we talked about was natural buildings and natural beauty of the setting. How do you feel that interfaces with the way that you do buildings at Dancing Rabbit?
There's a lot of creativity that goes into our homes, a lot of art, and a lot of love. So the combination can make for really beautiful, beautiful homes that are coming from our hearts, because they're...
And you find that it's not that expensive to do.
Well, one of the keys is that because we're building our homes ourselves, you can put so much of that time and energy into it, and because you're not using pre-manufactured materials, it doesn't take that much more energy when you're plastering a building to add in a slight sculpture or a mosaic, or when you're doing timber framing to choose a beautiful tree instead of something that's more plain. And so there's a lot of different things that you can do because you're handcrafting your home instead of just manufacturing a home.
So this basically means that you end up with a home which is a lot more energy efficient, and it's not going to be not as much warm air is going to be going out in the winter.
That's our goal, is both to create buildings that take the minimal amount of energy to create them and use natural materials that are healthy for both the humans that living in them and for the environment, and that then use a minimal amount of energy to maintain them over the long term, both in terms of heating and cooling, but also in terms of maintenance of the structure.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you bring up the topics like embodied energy, which means how much energy it took to actually produce the materials and how much energy is reflected in what you use, because whenever I read about homes and whenever you read about discussions of buildings, it's virtually always how much energy does the building use right now. And if you don't look at the energy that went into making that material, you're really leaving out a big part of it.
It is true that 80 to 90% of the energy that a building might use over its lifetime does come from the ongoing use, and only maybe 10 or 20 goes into the building itself. But there are some ecological choices, and people are trying to use certain materials to reduce their the energy. But if they take so much energy on the front side, you might not really be saving as much long term.
Well, what you said about 10 to 20% of the energy being what it takes to build the energy in terms, to build the home in terms of the lifetime of the home. Unfortunately, that's only true for buildings that last a long time.
That's true.
If you design a building to fall apart in 20 years, and what I worry is that so many of the things that I see going up now, I think, how long is this building going to be up? It's a century from now, it's probably not going to be here. And that's. But let me ask you one thing. Straw bale building is very important at Dancing Rabbit, isn't it? What is straw bale?
So straw bale building basically takes straw, which is what's left over when they harvest wheat or oats or rice, and they pack it into these bales just like you'd see at a farm stand, and we stack those up like big bricks and use those to build homes that are very well insulated, because you've got an 18-inch thick wall that's full of straw, which creates a lot of insulation, and then we plaster them. And so in the end, they end up looking similar to like an adobe building that you might see in the American Southwest. But they're very efficient. They're very and they're very beautiful, because you end up with the the curvature and the undulations of the wall. And for us, it's really turned out to be one of the more effective building techniques that really works for our climate and for the materials that we have at hand. We live in a prairie region, so we don't have a lot of timber resources. And we made a rule in our community that we don't use new lumber from outside of our bioregion. We use reclaimed lumber, we use new material that we can harvest locally. So straw and clay are really essential materials for us because they're available locally.
And I know how that can work, because actually twice I've stayed at Big Bend National Park in Texas, and they have the walls that are 18 inches thick, and the temperature gets there 110 to 120. And a couple of times I stayed there with no air conditioning, and just a ceiling fan and these 18-inch thick walls, and it's fine.
It's pretty amazing.
It is amazing. Well, we're going to need to take a break, and we will be back after this announcement. Welcome back to Green Time. I'm host Don Fitz. We're talking about community building at Dancing Rabbit Ecovillage, and I have with me a couple of guests who are members of Dancing Rabbit. I have Sharon Bagatell, and I have Tony Sirna. Now tell me, what are some of we were just talking about some of the things that go into designing a building at Dancing Rabbit. What is earthbag construction?
Earthbag construction is a pretty interesting technique where you take plastic sacks, they're sort of like feed sacks, and you can fill them with whatever the soil is that's around the building, or you can fill them with gravel or sand, and you can actually build a whole building out of that, including amazing arches and domes. And then it's another way to make it's sort of similar to a rammed earth house. And we have a couple buildings that are done that way. We've also used that to build the foundations of a number of buildings. And once those plastic bags are protected by plaster or other siding, then they'll last forever, and you end up using a little bit of plastic in your building, so it's not completely natural, but you use a pretty small amount, and the rest is all soil that you can get right from the ground. And it's something that they actually use in refugee camps and other areas where you can build a house just with a shovel and some plastic bags and whatever earth is at hand.
So do you use plaster on the inside of the house?
Right, you would use plaster on both the inside and the outside.
Inside and outside of the house. I remember reading something in the paper a few years ago that made it sound like Dancing Rabbit all had mud huts.
Right.
And I thought I think there's probably another side to the story. So basically things like straw and mud can be very good at insulators and very cost-effective at building materials, but you have the same plaster appearance that you would in a house built with more artificial and more expensive materials.
Yeah, I mean, we have some pretty fancy mud huts at Dancing Rabbit. They're pretty nice places, and we're trying to reclaim mud as a real building material. And there's a lot of different techniques that we use for that. I mean, the earthbag, the straw bale, cob, lake clay straw. We've got examples of all of those different techniques.
Okay, now, and to get away from the technical side of it, part of what you want to do in building is to design the building so that it promotes connectedness between people. How does Dancing Rabbit do that?
Well, we've designed our village to be at a pedestrian scale, so vehicles are not really allowed within the village on a day-to-day basis. People come in with heavy deliveries or emergency vehicles, but on a day-to-day basis, it's walking, it's biking, and we've oriented homes so that they connect with each other rather than all the buildings just facing the road and orienting just to cars. We're trying to orient buildings so that people's pathways will automatically intersect, where when you go out on your porch, you can see your neighbors on their porch and have a conversation with them. And so we're developing our village to promote connection between people rather than to wall each other off from each other. We don't have fences between our spaces. We're trying to connect with our neighbors, and we're trying to design things so that our home interacts with our neighbor's home.
Well, how young of a child can go out on its own at Dancing Rabbit?
I think I've seen 4- and 5-year-olds who pretty much have the run of the village, and they, their parents are in charge, but they can run to the neighbor's house and run up and down the street and just have to come back and check in every once in a while. And once they're older, the place is theirs as well as the surrounding natural areas. It's really magic.
And I know that in a lot of places, the parents would never let a 4-year-old out by themselves just for fear that the child would run into the street.
Right.
But you don't have that. I mean, maybe an older kid on a bicycle might be a little dangerous, but.
Right.
But you don't have that worry of cars.
We don't have a lot of cars every once in a while, but they drive so slowly. It's really the streets are for us.
Right.
And the kids even play in the streets, and they're always taking the gravel roads and sculpting them and making little imaginary play spaces there. So.
Yeah, and it is amazing to think about a space where people can live, where they don't have to worry about traffic, because that's one of the big worries that virtually everybody who lives in the city, well, not just in the city. I mean, if you live in a rural area, people barreling down the road, at 30 or 40 miles an hour. Not as frequently, but still it happens. Now, what about the materials that you use? Do you think the materials have as many toxins in them?
Well, that's one of the best things about natural building, is that you end up creating a healthy home that has really good indoor air quality, that's made of natural materials. We try and avoid any toxics as much as we can. Our new community building that we're building is going to be one of the most healthy, non-toxic homes that we can, because we're avoiding any added formaldehyde, flame retardants that are toxic. Everything's going to have to be is vetted to make sure that it is not going to affect indoor air quality and is not going to affect us or the people who constructed those materials, because a lot of the toxins are not as bad in your home, but there's someone in that factory who's actually being affected by those toxins.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's so many cases of people getting sick and not knowing what it is, and a lot of times that comes to some sort of sick building syndrome, where there's material either in the home or the workplace which a person is allergic to or makes the person nauseated, and they have all sorts of problems from that. Now, Sharon, one of the things that we talked about was before the show was cob building. Could you tell me a little bit about what that, and is that used at Dancing Rabbit?
We do use cob. Cob is a mixture of mud, sand, and straw, and it's very user friendly because you mix it up, and anybody can do it, and often it's done by dancing around in bare feet, and it's fun. And you make these little loaves, which comes from the name cob comes from the word loaf. And you glob it on, and you can sculpt and make it very beautiful. We have found that it's not the best material for our climate, mostly because we have a lot of humidity.
Okay, so that would be really good if we were drier, but you use some of it, but not a lot.
We do use some of it, often for the south side of a house or certain applications for use. And there are homes that were made completely with cob, and we're finding that also for heating purposes, it's a lot of thermal mass, and so it takes a lot to heat the home. Once it's heated, it stays warm.
Yeah, we found in general that a little bit more insulation does a lot better in our climate, and so straw bales and other insulative materials, in addition to cob, make a really good building. So we've got a lot of hybrid systems in that way.
Right, mixing clay and
straw. So you
just,
as you go along, you just figure out what works.
We've had a lot of trial and error, and most of it's been pretty successful, but we've also had some challenges over the years too.
And that's one of the great things about Dancing Rabbit is experimentation. We really encourage experimentation. And so we are learning from mistakes, and there clearly have been some mistakes. My sense is that we don't go, oh, what a terrible mistake, but like, oh, we learned something from that. Let's move on.
Right. And tell me, are green building and natural building the same thing?
No, not at all. I mean, there's a lot of overlap, but green building is usually a more mainstream construction technique. Again, trying to reduce energy, trying to, looking sometimes at toxin, non-toxic stuff. But natural building really focuses on the natural materials. So using, clay, sand, and straw, and wood. And we really try and find the overlap between the two, so that we are looking for the appropriate uses of, the more mainstream materials, while also really using natural materials as much as possible, and, finding the hybrid between the two, because that's really where the magic is, I think.
Yeah, and I'm always suspicious of green building material, because sometimes I just think it has green paint put over what's like. Do you? I have to ask you this: what sort of clothes dryers do you use most at Dancing Rabbit?
The sun.
I always am amazed when I see a green building, and in the green building they have a green clothes dryer instead of using clotheslines. Okay, Sharon Bagatell, tell me, we just have a little bit of time left. What would you like viewers to take with them to think about green building at Dancing Rabbit?
That there are many, many different ways to build. A lot of it comes from the design and thinking things through, and being very intentional about your choices. And we're not necessarily going to build the perfect building that we're just environmental angels, but we can make very intentional choices by looking at what it is that we're putting into our buildings.
And Tony, I want to ask you the same question. What do you think are the most important things to remember about building at Dancing Rabbit?
I think one of the amazing things that we demonstrate is that people without a lot of construction experience can build their own homes, that all of our homes in this world could be made of natural materials, be super insulated, perform really well, and be beautiful and magical, and be a space that's healthy to live in. And those buildings could be arranged and oriented so that they are easy to heat and cool, and so that they create community. And I think that's the real magic that we're demonstrating there at Dancing Rabbit.
Well, I want to thank you very much. I want to thank Tony Sirna. I want to thank Sharon Bagatell for being with us this episode. And I want to thank our viewer for tuning in. And please tune in at the next episode of Green Time a week from the same time.